Audience behavior is already telling a clear story. In South Africa, this conversation carries extra weight as the country marks 50 years of broadcast, a milestone that highlights just how dramatically viewing has shifted from scheduled television to on-demand, mobile-first, and connected screen experiences. Even though 2026 is only just beginning, change is already accelerating. Audiences are experimenting faster, platforms are adapting quicker, and the line between watching, creating, and interacting continues to blur. From fan-driven content and shorter formats to live sport, live streaming, and connected TV, 6 key shifts are set to define how South Africans engage with streaming this year. To unpack what's driving these changes, we are joined on the line by Leslie Adams, Sales Director at Reach Africa. Leslie, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to The Upside. I tell you what, 50 years of broadcast in South Africa, that's a long time. Perhaps you would be the best to tell us where it all began in terms of our viewing behavior back 50 years ago to what it is right now.
I don't know if a recap is my specialty, but definitely a current perspective and maybe even a forecast is where I play my role. But over the 50 years of television in South Africa, which launched late, by the way, South Africa delayed the initiation and adoption of TV due to the propaganda nature and the power of the platform. And I think that has remained consistent throughout the years of TV. The 5th of January marked 50 years of TV and were the earliest broadcast. At that point, we had very limited programming. In fact, TV ended. There's quite a few people who do remember TV ending and waiting for it to start the following morning. Scheduled program was sort of the way of the go. And ultimately, the migration of the soap opera from radio into television became sort of a staple. It's become, it was, and sometimes still is, sort of the center of the household. It was the center of our family time. TV viewing and 7 p.m. news was a way of life. And I think, we've evolved so much that TV has gone everywhere. It's no longer just a single device in the home. It's on every screen. It's wherever you consume your content. And personalized, curated viewing is sort of the way of the world right now.
It's a very interesting time that we find ourselves in. And also just to acknowledge that we're seeing that people are now no longer just watching these shows. They're now remixing them. They're creating their own versions of the shows that appear on the screen, as it were. Anything you'd like to say around that trend and where you see it going in the future?
Look, it's a really interesting trend, which I think will benefit the content owners and platforms really well. For every dollar spent on content creation, there's also a dollar spent on content marketing. And for a long, long time, stories are ultimately about how we see ourselves and envision ourselves in different storylines as a whole. And we've now embraced the age of AI. And we've seen a major platform, a major content owner in Disney Plus, embrace AI like no others before. A lot of the AI discussion has been about them stealing IP. Disney's leaned into the technology, and it will allow fans to use some of their extensive IP and create their own storylines. And I think that will be a very interesting way of going forward, and really enhance how people engage with stories going forward and engage with characters we know and love.
It's 20 minutes after 3 p.m. Central African time. We'll continue our conversation with Leslie Adams, the Sales Director at Reach Africa, as we discuss how AI and fan-made content are reshaping the streaming experiences in 2026. And we'll touch on the 6 key shifts that we are expecting to see this year. Don't go anywhere.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Mmatsheko Mosito and Tebogo Excellent on The Upside.
21 minutes after 3 p.m. Central African time, still in conversation with Leslie Adams, Sales Director at Reach Africa, on how AI and fan-made content are reshaping the streaming experiences in 2026. Leslie, let's talk about the 6 key shifts that are set to define how South Africans engage with streaming in this year, 2026?
Yeah, look, it's a very exciting time for television, really. It's both scary for the incumbents, very exciting for the consumers out there, with a lot of benefits coming to the consumer across the board. And in fact, if you think about it, TV as a legacy media has probably adopted to the digital age more aggressively than any other digital or traditional media in the past. Some of that six trends, and one of them we've touched on a little earlier around how one of the platforms and many more platforms will adopt AI and give fans the ability to curate and create content
Yeah.
using major studio IP, which is a very interesting space to be in. There's a lot of discussion globally around what is the creator economy going to look like? What is the new influencer economy going to look like? And ultimately, giving fans the power to use existing IP means that the creative economy moves into the sort of formalized distribution space where it's not just produced for TV, but produced for TV by creators, which will be a very interesting space, both from a content creation perspective, but also from a social media engagement fanatic perspective, where fans become another marketing machine for distributors and platform owners out there.
I think it's interesting for us to note, Leslie, that live sport and live streaming are still very powerful as we speak. So how do they then fit into this increasingly on-demand world?
I guess if you look at the evolution of how direct-to-consumer streaming has sort of taken off, it is ultimately bedrocked by the classical portfolios and old content, which sort of bedrock the foundation of the library of these different streaming platforms, which means it actually underscores the power of TV content, both old and new, which is the first point. We've seen with Netflix launching live sport activities like the Jake Paul boxing fights moving into the space more and more. In the US, we see the NFL, the MLS, and the F1 moving into this live sports streaming environment because younger and younger audiences are not to be found in broadcast, but to be found in the streaming space. But ultimately, what this actually realizes and really underscores for us is the balance and the importance of both live television and live streaming to reach different audiences in different spaces. The beauty of how traditional television has embraced digital is really that TV is not stayed in one place, but gone everywhere the consumer is and is available to them at their fingertips.
Leslie, is it the right move going forward by television or TV platforms to now incorporate the social media experience? And that's now watching television in a portrait format instead of landscape to cater to the individuals who are on their phones every single day, and now also seeing on our cell phones the Netflix, trying to move towards spaces where they are creating movies and short form movies or short films rather, that are in vertical format. Is that the right way to approach it, or are we continuing to fuel the idea that our attention span is very limited and therefore we need to create content that supports that?
So it's really interesting, and maybe to touch on a couple of things. One, I think a few years ago it went viral that our attention spans are limited. We now have a memory of a goldfish. But Netflix and other platforms has disproved that when you can sit down and binge 4 or 5 episodes, 4 or 5 hours, and not sleep overnight and go to work the next day. So the attention span is there if the content is right for the consumer. And I think the move to vertical video lends itself to two different sort of spaces. One, obviously being more mobile forward. Mind you, streaming has always been multi-screened. It's always been available across your mobile, your tablet, your laptop, or your smart television. And moving into the vertical space lends itself to a new vertical of content. So micro dramas, shorter form content that maybe you might not have a time to sit down and binge an hour-long episode or multiple episodes, but you may have time to consume a 90-minute episode, 90-second episode, or a 2-minute episode. And that becomes really interesting in terms of how we consume story-led quality content, right? So vertical video unlocks a whole new way of consuming short-form quality content on your mobile phone as opposed to just social media, which is one. But again, to reiterate, TV has taken a stance strategically, not just to be one thing, but to be the high quality version of content that takes on every single screen, delivering that content to you at your convenience.
Let's talk about advertising, in all of this. What is going to be the future of advertising when we look at the space of connected TV in the future?
Look, we are seeing an upending of the business model of TV. Traditionally, we have the ecosystem made up of broadcasters, signal sellers from a spectrum perspective. We have internet platform owners who own libraries, a licensing business who purely creates content, and this entire ecosystem is being upended. And how it's being upended is that the eyeballs are shifting from one device to the other. The business model is now being owned from a vertical perspective. So a Netflix or a Showmax may own content production and now content distribution, where those were previously two separate entities. But what it has done is really segment and fracture and fragment where and how people watch TV. Right? That could be on any screen, any device at any time. So the idea around having prime time, which is a concept we all grew up with, that from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening, you had the most concentrated eyeballs, that may still be there, but it's fractured across so many channels right now that now broadcast or advertising has to be spread against where those eyeballs are. So on the one hand, it could be quite disastrous for TV, where they lose a large chunk of the spend on which they rely on as a business model. But equally so, those same broadcasters who have streaming platforms who now accommodate those audiences in other spaces may win advertising investment in those spaces. And balancing those two as a business becomes really tricky, given where your lunch is made and where your bread is buttered. But I think from an industry perspective, it means a lot more opportunities for advertisers to reach audiences possibly more cheaply, a lot more premium environments to reach them in a digital environment, which was completely dominated by social media, short form media, and the lack of brand safety therein. And what it does now is merge this high quality TV content available everywhere, and audiences and brands need to meet themselves there as well. So ultimately, the business model is being shaken up, with revenue moving from one traditional broadcast space into a more digitally aligned space. But I think ultimately for the consumer, it may mean more relevant ads, more timely placed, maybe a lighter ad load, which means less ads per consumer, which could be a good thing. High quality content available to where you're watching, and ultimately, hopefully, high quality advertising content as well.
Exciting time to be alive and to be exploring these different changes in the digital and the broadcasting space. And Reach Africa is one of those platforms where if you need assistance in terms of getting your content out there to the right places, to the right people, and also creating an environment where content creators also have a base where they can share their content and distribute it to various spaces. Reach Africa is the place where you can get the most value for your buck. We're still joined by Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and for expanding on how our viewing behavior has changed and what we can look forward to in the year 2026. Much appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Enjoy.
The voice of Leslie Adams, sales director at Reach Africa. Go check them out. reachafrica.com is the website. 30 minutes after 3 p.m. Central African time. Let's get the latest sports. Musibudi Makura is standing by.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Tebogo. Very good afternoon once again from the sports desk. So informed Kaizer Chiefs captain Brandon Peterson has reiterated that his focus now is to continue to perform consistently, while for the